Fire Emblem Engage is a strange game to talk about, especially when it comes to reviews. On the one hand, this game has a great set of characters. This game has some of the best gameplay the series has to offer, with a ton of customization and a ton of different ways to make units busted so that you can take your favorites and make them incredibly strong. But there's also units that are really strong right at the gate, so I feel like it's probably going to be really great for LTC runs. It is gameplay-wise and mechanically extremely sound. It also has a story that has some really nice heartfelt moments in it, but that tonally is kind of all over the place. And as much as I personally love it, I recognize that it's kind of a hard thing to recommend just for the strange deviation in tone that it takes. We'll get into a little bit more specifics in just a little bit, but let's start off with the mechanical stuff that we have to talk about. First things first, gameplay in Fire Emblem Engage is great. It plays really well. The map design is really solid. I love the way that we've moved from like 3 houses had the different combat arts and things like that, and the battalions. It's a lot simpler here, but they have added in some new wrinkles. So you have chain attacks that allow you to set up your party so that you can take down enemies little bits at a time with extra damage that have a much higher chance to hit most of the time. There's also the new break mechanic, which allows you, if you have weapon triangle advantage against an enemy, to break them, forcing them to drop their weapon. This is really handy against bosses or against tough enemies that you want to be able to attack with other allies without having to worry about a counterattack. It can be used against you, of course, as well, which can lead to a little bit of frustration if you don't plan around it, due to suddenly, hey, this character that's very strong is now no longer able to clear out this portion of the map they should have been able to clear out on enemy phase. Personally, I really enjoy it. I think it adds yet another wrinkle that makes the game more player phase focused as compared to enemy phase focused, and on higher difficulties I could see it being something that you have to play around even more instead of just something that you use to your advantage or work around a little bit on enemy phase to be able to make sure you don't have to deal with it. As a whole, I think it's a great new addition to the series. You have the engage mechanic that allows you to take an emblem ring that has been put on a character and engage them to give them different abilities and even different skills that they can get from that ring, and they can even get to the point where they can keep those abilities and equip a different ring. It costs a lot of bond fragments, but we'll get into that as well. But that allows you to take a unit that maybe was underperforming a little bit and boost them up to be able to be a lot stronger. Or it allows you to take, as I did, a unit that is already very good and make them absolutely unstoppable, to the point where the final chapter, I didn't see the mechanics of that final chapter all the way through. I destroyed the final boss in just a couple turns without seeing the full final mechanics because of how strong my units were on normal. And that is the first big thing I want to recommend. If you are looking for a hard challenge, or for a difficult challenge, I would say, you might want to consider bumping it up to hard. Normal was very easy. I had a couple times where I had to use the time crystal that's given to you in this game, which is your turn wheel, right? It's the ability to go back and fix a mistake that you make. But I never had to redo a chapter. I never got to the point where it was that bad, because realistically, you can make some incredibly busted characters in this. And that was really fun for me. I'm already looking forward to a second playthrough where I can make different characters busted, and I can play around with different characters that I didn't use on my first playthrough. But if you want a meticulous, calculated experience where everything is really difficult and really hard, I would say definitely at least go to hard, maybe go straight to maddening, because it is pretty simple towards the end. I was getting very reckless, to the point of, yeah, I'll put this person in crit range, even if their crit's a little high, because, I mean, I haven't used the time crystal yet at all, and it's probably going to work out. That person's really strong, and they were, so it did. And even if it hadn't, just use the time crystal, and there you go. You know, I could see an LTC run of this game being really fun because of how strong some of the units come out, and trying to force my way through that way. I like LTCing, but I know that's not everybody's experience when it comes to Fire Emblem either. At its core, this is a very solid gameplay-wise Fire Emblem game with a ton of options to customize your experience, I guess is the right way to put it. You can choose to forge and upgrade your weapons, to refine them. You can choose to engrave them, or you can choose to just use them at base. There is one big thing when it comes to weapons, which is durability is gone again. So weapons have infinite durability, which means that there's nothing stopping you from just putting all of the best weapons on your units other than gold, and there are ways to get gold. Anna is one of them, but there are other ways to get gold. It led to, by the end of the game, some of my strongest characters had a killing weapon, a brave weapon, and a 2-range weapon on them at all times, which kind of just made it impossible for them to be stopped, really. They had answers to every situation. And there's even an emblem that makes it where your character automatically equips the best weapon that they have in their inventory for that fight. So there are so many ways to get busted because of that. But if you don't want to invest time or grind or anything like that to be able to make units really strong, and you don't want to have to rely on the emblems, there are also some units that are really strong right at the gate and are absolutely worth using. Just like in most Fire Emblem games. The music in Engage is bombastic and great. It fits just about every scene. It's really fun. There is a lot of really great tracks in here that I can't wait to add to my playlist. I really like the characters. I think the characters are really well done. And there are some characters that are less well done that only care about tea. And then there are other characters that are like, hey, here's a priest that is, dedicated to his worship, but also is open to other people's worship around him. Or maybe here's a character that seems kind of one note at first and seems like all they care about is, bulking up. But maybe actually there's a lot more to them. And I really like the characters here. And I don't want to spoil too much for anybody, but the characters in this game were really, really fun, not just to use, but also to get the supports for. I don't necessarily love the support system in this game. There aren't a lot of ways to build support, though they've just added a new one with the expansion pass. But you can get some pretty good supports with different characters. Some of them are kind of one note. There are a couple characters that just talk about tea all the time. But for the most part, some of them are really good. For the most part, they're really good. And then some of them are outstanding. There are a couple of support lines in that game that, I don't want to spoil characters here, but really, really good. However, and this might be considered a spoiler, but there are no paired endings for the characters, and that really bothers me. I had some units that I got to A rank together, and I was really excited to see their paired endings, and there just weren't any. And that absolutely, I watched all the ending and was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad everybody got their own individual moment, but I sure wish some of these people had been able to pair off. Don't understand why they can't. The emblem rings are really interesting, though towards the end of the game, and especially if you get the expansion pass, you will have enough emblem rings to outfit your entire roster that you're using in your main party. They are not all created equal. They're all very good, and they all give different things, but some of them are absolutely standouts. There's an emblem ring that gives you Canter, which is basically Canto, and allows you to move again after attacking. There's an emblem ring that automatically equips you with the best weapon in your inventory for every fight. There's an emblem ring that just lets you become much faster than everyone else. Emblem rings that give you more evasion. And obviously putting these on any unit is going to make them better, but putting them on good units is going to make them very, very good. And that is where, again, I know I've mentioned it a couple times, the customization angle of this game really lets you have a different experience every time you play. Let's talk maps. Fire Emblem Engage has some of my favorite maps already in the franchise. There are so many good maps in this game. Not just talking about the DLC paralogs, but most of the paralogs have good maps, though of course those are references to older maps for the most part, so it makes sense that they would be good, right? But there's also maps that include different effects. An effect that will push you back. I'm trying to be vague as much as possible here. An effect that will push you back unless you're behind a certain thing, and so you have to move forward little by little as you try to progress your way across. A map that has a lot of doors that you have to get through. Maps that have very short corridors that allow you to really take advantage of your emblem rings. Maps that are in a little bit more open space, but maybe the way that you can get through is going to be a little bit more difficult because there are destructible objects in the way. The map design in Engage is very, very good, and there was never a map that I played where I was like, well, this is really boring, which absolutely has happened in some of the other games. There were a few maps that were like, okay, yeah, I see what they're doing here. It's kind of cool. But the vast majority of the maps were really fun and really memorable. So now, before we get into spoilers, let's talk story. And story is, like I said, kind of a mixed bag depending on how you feel about a light and fun tone that is also undercut by some really dark stuff. The story is kind of all over the place, and I'm not going to sit here and just defend it and say that it's great, but I do think it's good. I think that where it where it eventually gets to is really solid. There are some very powerful moments, and most of it is carried by the voice acting. I think the voice acting for both male and female Alear is very, very good and elevates what otherwise would be scenes that might not have hit as hard. But there are some weird deviations in tone in this game. The first roughly 10 chapters are mostly, other than a couple small moments, light, fun, everybody's having a good time, things are going well. And then after that, we have like a very strong dip in tone, which I really liked. And then it comes back up again to be like, hey, you know, here we go. We're a party on our own, going on adventures. Everything's cool. We're going to save the world. And then it dips again. And that dip is also very good. But I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. I like the story in this game a lot. I like those lighthearted moments, and I like those tonal shifts, those darker moments. But I absolutely understand that there will be a lot of people that do not, that much prefer those chapters where everything is a lot more serious, and that don't love the Saturday morning cartoon style, as some people have put it, of Fire Emblem Engage. There are moments where you go, well, of course that happens. That's, you know, that's got to happen. Of course this is what things are going. And then there are moments in the story that made me go, why didn't I consider that's an option? Wow, okay. All right, we're doing this. As a whole, I think the story is still worth seeing, but if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of patience for Saturday morning cartoon shenanigans, those first 10 chapters or so are going to be pretty rough for you to get through, and I'm not going to hide that from you. I think that's something everybody that's looking at buying this game needs to be aware of. This does not have the straight tone that is always about the same of like a Fire Emblem 9. This is much more all over the place, kind of in the way that Fates is, but I think the story is a lot more centered than Fates. I don't think it's quite as, I don't want to use the word nonsensical because that's not fair, but I don't think there are decisions in the story that make me go, but why would Flora do this the way that Fates did? So there is that at least. One last thing before we get into spoilers, which is the hub world, the Somniel. This is obviously a refined version of the monastery. That's what they're going for, right? It's supposed to be smaller and not take as much time to get around, but also have just as much to do. For the most part, I enjoyed my time in the Somniel, and for the first 20 or so chapters, I came back to the Somniel after every chapter, after every paralogue. I gathered up all of my ores because you can adopt animals, and that's great, but dogs are the only real choice because they give you ore, which you can use for forging, so I just only ever saw the dogs there. I would do my forges, I would do my training, I would do my bond rings, I would take care of all that stuff, I'd eat a meal. I did that for about 27 chapters total because of the paralogues. And then I just got tired of it. And I didn't fish anymore. I didn't go play with Sami anymore. I didn't go exercise anymore. I just wanted to get to the next chapter. And I think it is definitely better than the monastery, right? Because I got tired of the monastery way sooner. And the monastery is the thing that makes me go, ugh, every time I think about playing Three Houses again. But I still don't think it's quite there yet. I understand that there needs to be a difference between the, hey, older Fire Emblems just had a menu that you used, and here's a space where you can run around with your people. I'm not against the space where you can run around with your people. I just still wish it wasn't such a chore. The Somniel's not bad. It's better than the monastery, but I still kind of don't like it. Reveal our secrets. Emblem of spoilers. Emblem, engage! So let's talk story spoilers. I really like the story in this game a lot. I think there's some really cool ideas in here. I love the ideas of the emblems. I was worried going in that this game would be a lot of fan service, and it is a lot of fan service, but the emblems feel like a part of this world. They feel like a part of the story in a way that I find really satisfying. And although the Lumera and Sombron conflict is not very good, and I'm probably not going to remember Sombron as like a main villain after this, I think that Alear's story is actually pretty good. Lumera was alright. I mean, as soon as she was introduced as your mother, I knew what was going to happen because it's Fire Emblem. But her story is pretty solid, and it's her interactions with Alear, and again, the voice acting that really sell that moment to you, and then what happens later. It's all very nice. I liked the relationship between Marth and Alear. I thought that was really solid. And the stuff with Vale and Alear, that was really good. When we look at the lords, though, man, Alfred, I like Alfred. Alfred kind of doesn't matter as far as the story is concerned. Diamant has like his own arc, and it's good, and I really like Diamant as a character. Also kind of not important to the story, right? Ivy. Ivy's cool. I like Ivy. She does her thing. She's there. Might as well not matter for the story after that, right? Tamara as well. Hortensia doesn't even show up in story cutscenes after her stuff. Tamara as well. Fagato doesn't show up anymore. Alchrist every once in a while gets to show up. Saline doesn't get to show up. It feels like the lords are almost an afterthought in a way that I find really unsatisfying. And I wanted to use them, but I didn't feel as like I needed to use them, which maybe is a good thing compared to older Fire Emblems. But I wish they mattered more to the story other than just, you know, hey, yeah, we'll bring our forces. Let's go. We're with you, Divine Dragon. It kind of felt like they didn't matter. And if it wasn't for the fact that Diamant was one of my best units, because I gave him Ike, I don't think I would have cared about them at all. But when he showed up in cutscenes, I was like, yeah. Because they're fun characters, they don't matter for most cutscenes. Vale, of course, matters a lot and is a great character. I really like her story. I really love Mauvier and Marnie and the situation that happens there. And just real quick, while we're in spoilers, Pendreo and Mauvier's supports are my favorite supports in the entire game. Absolutely love them. Zofia and Gris are okay. Their ending got me more than I thought it would, but probably because of how good the voice acting was. It was a lot more surprising, I guess, in how hard it hit, because I kind of didn't care about either one of them as characters up until then. But Marnie's was pretty good because I didn't think that's what would happen. I thought she'd come back for sure. And then I really like Mauvier. I had to start using Mauvier immediately after that. I gave him Celica, and he became my warp around the map doing cool stuff guy, and I really liked him. I supported Marin, and their supports were really cute. I liked those supports a lot. I don't necessarily feel like that ending was very romantic, but it's okay, I guess. Not all of them have to be. One other thing I wanted to highlight while we're talking spoilers here is that there is something really poignant about Alir coming back as a corrupted just to die again and then be brought back by the emblems. I expected that Alir would be brought back by the emblems when Alir dies. That was just the way the story was going to go to me. That was obvious based on what the emblems were saying and talking about trying to bring Lumera back. It's like, yeah, this is going to happen. And then when it doesn't and he chooses to become a corrupted, that was really potent. That hit me a lot harder than I thought it would. And then getting to see Alir as an emblem now, talking to Alir from the past, that was really solid. Again, this game is carried by Alir's voice acting as far as I'm concerned. It's an incredible performance. And the entire plot of, hey, rising past what I was born as to be what I choose to be is pretty solid, and I like it quite a bit. Alir's a good character. Ultimately, wrapping all this together, because I know this review has been very rambly and all over the place. Trust me, it's been very hard to record as well. My thoughts on this game are very splintered. They're very fragmented. On the one hand, this is some of the most fun I've had in Fire Emblem in a long time. And on the other hand, the story is alright. It's okay. Normally the story is what makes me play Fire Emblem. And in this case, it was the gameplay that kept me playing Fire Emblem, and I don't know how I feel about that. It's really hard to parse that. I like the characters a lot, but I don't think the support system is very good in this game. I like just about all the music. I really enjoy the Psalm themes. Those are really solid. I just don't think the lords are used very well. And at the end of the day, where I'm sitting at in this is, man, this game's fun to play, and I like a lot of the characters. I wish the story was different. I wish these characters mattered. And that it's kind of a sour taste in my mouth in what is otherwise a really good game. And I kind of hate that part about it because I really like Engage. I really do. It just feels like a lot of it doesn't matter. And maybe a second playthrough will have me feeling differently. I'm really curious what your thoughts are going to be. Please let me know in the comment section down below. But ultimately, I do recommend Engage. I think it's very fun. I think it's a solid game to play. I really love the gameplay, and the characters are very fun. The music's really good. The maps are great. I just think the story is a pretty big miss for me, even though I really liked a lot of elements of it. It's so close to being... Whereas, like, a Fates has a story that I found really frustrating, or an Awakening has a story that I found not really an issue. It didn't grab me, but it was completely fine, right? Engage has a story that I want to love, that I feel like just let me down in, unfortunately, too many places. And it leaves me going, yeah, the gameplay's great. The story's all right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum that Fire Emblem Engage has to offer.